Hey, hey, Mark Rodriguez here. You're watching the Fighting Podcast. I guess America's number two top reason for top American cure for insomnia. And with me are,
William White, aka Ninja Panda, 1980.
Rikki Roxx, God of Thunder, Lord of Rock and Roll. Happy to be back as always here on the podcast. And, of course, the one and only Mr. Electricity himself. I'm going to throw it to.
It's Johnny Rodriguez.
There he is.
and everyone's like, in the crowd. But anyways, guys, this episode is, well, this is the Odyssey exclusive, actually. So yeah, this will be an Odyssey in video form, but of course you can listen to it on Spotify, on, what else we got? We got Samsung, we got Amazon, and we got ListenCast. So I still got to see what that is, but we're on all of them, so that's pretty cool. Today we're going to go real back in time. We're going to talk about Double Dragon, the first ever beat 'em up, and how different it was from the arcade and the NES version, and also the live action, yeah, the live action movie. And I guess you could kind of throw in like maybe the cartoon and the Marvel comics and stuff like that, because it's all kind of circled around that first game, you know. And what else? Oh yeah, also we're gonna try to see, you might not hear this all in one shot. We might cut it up in two different podcasts, but we're also gonna do a dream match thing for Pokes E-Fed, where he might join us in a bit to better explain when we get there, you know. So
Oh, and sorry to interrupt, but was there also a Genesis version of the Double Dragon game?
yeah, and that one was actually like closer to the arcade. That's the one that we played once.
There were 8 million versions of that. I was hoping we'd get into that. Sorry, I'm having some problems with my setup back here.
Yeah.
First of all, though, I got to kind of half correct you there a little bit, Mr. Rodriguez Sr. It wasn't necessarily the first beat 'em up. It was the first to utilize a lot of the conventions and tropes, and we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
But really, it was more of like a spin-off sort of successor to Renegade. There were other brawlers and beat 'em ups before Double Dragon, but it wasn't the first, but it was the first to do a lot of things that games like Final Fight would pick up on and everything else like that. So first off, I tried to correct you before you kept going with it, but yeah, that's what I was saying. It wasn't necessarily the first beat 'em up. It just was the first of its kind in many ways. But secondly, to answer Mr. Electricity's question, yeah, there were. Oh God, I have to check my notes because Double Dragon was. I'm not shocked. You may think it's the first in a lot of ways because it was ported to fucking everything, literally. The NES is the most well-known port, the one we're going to talk about today after we get done talking about the arcade. It came out for the Sega Master System, which actually, to correct you again, was by most people's standards the closest port to the arcade for several reasons we're going to talk about. But it also came out for the Game Boy, the Atari 2600 and 7800, the Commodore 64. It came out for all the personal computers over back in Europe back in 88 through 91. It came out for the Genesis, the Atari Lynx, the fucking Game Boy Advance even had a fucking remake of this thing. So
Yeah.
it wouldn't be shocking to consider it. Many people probably think it was the first beat 'em up because it was the first super successful one, definitely. It took earlier beat 'em ups and just blew them up 10 times bigger, you know? And it was all over the world. There was good ports, there were bad ports, and obviously today we're mostly going to be talking about the arcade and the NES port, which is what most people played. But oh yeah, man, that game, it was everywhere. It had literally like a 5-year run from 88 through like 91, I think, which, so almost 88, 9, 90, so 4 years Double Dragon was in the marketplace. Just that first game. The other sequels were coming out also, but that first game was still having its own success on the home console and PC market. So I got a lot of excitement out of doing the research for this one because, like I said, when we got together to talk about doing this, I only played Double Dragon a little bit, but it was memorable. It was a huge part. If you were a gamer back then, man, 88, 89, 90, Double Dragon was everywhere. The whole franchise. It was at home. It was in the arcades. It was in cartoons. It was in the movie theaters. I bet a lot of us wish it wasn't, but yeah, man, it was a phenomenon. It's kind of one that's sort of become forgotten about because not the property has been kind of dormant mostly, except for a few exceptions. But it was the thing for the longest time, man, and it's cool to be immersed in it because it was a lot bigger than people remember or give it credit for.
And hey, Jupi joined us here.
Jupi-chan.
Howdy.
All right, so we can kind of go around with our first. We got some angry muffins already, yo.
By the way, these muffins, I got this muffin at a place called Wawa. They have
Mhm.
amazing pastries and baked goods if you're into that. They're open 24/7. It's kind of a Jersey thing, though.
Yeah.
We
So,
have Wawas here. As a matter of fact, one of the things I hated that they built after I got back, like there's a Wawa go right up the street. So it's like a 2 or 3 minute drive for me. But I used to go there a lot before, like it was at the other location, but they built one near here, so easy to get to.
They're
Yeah.
great when you're old, you're tired, you're hurt, and you work with fucking children.
Okay, I'll give you that.
Mm-hmm. You like those types that couldn't even handle a target, huh?
Ricky Roxx, you're gonna throw away the muffin when you're really mad and pissed off.
You never throw away a muffin.
You just eat it angrily. So, any first stories, guys?
Not even if one of those idiot EVPs comes and kicks down your fucking door. You still don't waste muffins.
Jeez. Well,
Not even if
anyways,
Zeta.
my first experience with the original Double Dragon, because I've heard of it here and there. You guys ever seen the movie The Wizard? I remember they did mention it, like, whoa, you made so many points in Double Dragon, that kind of shit, but never actually played it. So one time, this was before we ever thought we would ever live in Mexico. Well, one time, my dad and I went to Mexico, like for a trip and stuff, and I got to check out the arcade, and that's the first time I've ever seen Pit Fighter. That's a story for another video. And I saw Double Dragon, and it was cool. It was like, these two guys. I like the fact you could pick up like the bats and the barrels, and like, this big dude breaks through a wall and shit like that. So that was my first time playing it. So it's kind of hard to decide because I can only go to the arcade like maybe 2 times or so because, trip and all that. But it was like, do I play Pit Fighter or do I play Double Dragon? Because both of them were kind of getting my attention at the time. But yeah, so years later, we finally rented the NES version because, of course, video rental stores were popular. Blockbuster was the big one in, I guess, I don't know, farther areas, but we had all these little rinky-dinky ones around town. And yeah, I was surprised that Double Dragon was the way it was in NES version as opposed to the arcade. So we'll go more into that later. But what do you guys ever had your first run-in or experience with the game, either version of it?
Well, my first experience with the arcade version was at the Circle K gas station, which was a couple of miles away from my school. So this was back in the day when the convenience stores used to actually have arcade machines and actual comic book stands. The good times back then. So, I'd go in and get a soda, and I walked by, and I remember seeing that the Punch-Out game was gone, and in its place was this game called Double Dragon with these two guys named Spike and Hammer on the side. So I went ahead and, dropped recorder in, and it was just freaking amazing because first off, it's a fighter, but it's not like, oh, well, you just get to pick up this random, random fighting piece off the ground. No, you can actually, beat this out of the opponent's hand and then pick it up, or worse yet, they could do the same thing to you and pick it up, which was pretty innovative at the time. And then also what freaked me out was the first time ever seeing a Bobo bust through a wall. Like, the first time I saw it, I was like, shit, I'm done. And that was a mid-boss. That was the scary part. So, here it goes. A couple of years later, I run into it at Blockbuster Video, same as you, and rented it for the Nintendo. I was like, this is a completely different game, but still pretty good. Still had a lot of fun with it. But yeah, that was my first occurrences on both of the Double Dragons.
If I can go?
Yeah.
Go for it.
So for myself, I really don't have so much with the Double Dragon games. Like the main thing I remember seeing it in the arcade, played it a couple of times when I could get on it, and that's pretty much it. Because like I said, the mall had the arcade, so I played that for a little bit, and I didn't really get much into it because you needed money to play. Okay, so I didn't have that, so I couldn't really play that much. Now with the NES version, I can honestly say I've never played the NES version. The main thing I remember about the NES version are commercials, and then like maybe kids talking about it at school. I was in elementary school back then, and always talking about you need the game Genie just to play the game. So that has always been my image of Double Dragon. For the NES anyway. It's a difficult game, and you needed a game Genie to get through it. So like I said, I don't really have so much. I don't have the memories and stuff like you guys do with the game because I never really played it. And even my cousin who did have an NES, he never had it. He and his brother, they never had it. So we never played it. Only the little bit in the arcade. And I thought it was fun because, just a beat 'em up. And I had no problem with beat 'em up. I mean, you get that, Turtles, X-Men, just fun to do.
So essentially, you're joining us today so we don't get canceled. Right?
Oh,
Because,
yes, I am judging you guys right now. You better be on your best behavior.
Well, obviously we're men of culture, but the fact is, it seems like, everybody, you need to have a certain demographic makeup to even be allowed on the air anymore these days. So I thank you for joining us because, even though I do want to talk about Double Dragon today, and I will, but that brings me to another point I wanted to talk about today because it seems topical in light of recent events, especially at places like G4. That topic is sexism in gaming. We really haven't talked about that enough. Am I right, Mark?
Oh, yeah. We haven't covered that at all, actually. But
I come out here with you guys over and over and over again. And even though I maybe don't know as much about some of these games as you guys, I'm still here to try to give my insight and raise my voice. And still, I am repeatedly harassed and flamed because I am not as bangable as Johnny Rodriguez. And I think that is fucked up. All right, I'm not here to be objectified by you people, okay? I'm not just here to be easy on the eyes for you. Mark Rodriguez obviously is not here to be easy on the eyes for you. Johnny Rodriguez, well, nobody can compete with that guy, so we're just going to fucking move on. But the point of the matter is, okay, I shouldn't be given special flame just because maybe I happen to be the only guy here with a mullet, all right? So give me a fucking break. We're out here providing free content for you people, and maybe in 2022, you could be a little more appreciative and kind of people like us. And if you don't like it, watch it anyway because our numbers kind of suck, so we need to get them up. Peace!
oh my God! Then next week, 30 of our staff members all get laid off and everything.
But that
would put us at like negative 24. Our staff would be negative 24.
In all seriousness, I mean, it is an interesting topic though, because how many times, when legit like women gamers play games, people still refer to them like, oh, they're just, they don't know how to play the game or whatever. You still hear those remarks even in 2022. So yeah, going on with the topic, do you want to go first, Woody White, or do you want me to talk about how
Well, he already talked about his experience, remember?
I already talked about my experience with the game. You go ahead.
He told us about his run-in with Linda Lash and all that.
I got a little...
Johnny, I'm eating my muffin. Go ahead.
Anyways, Mr. Electricity, Johnny Rodriguez, I'm going to... Okay, so pretty much, I don't think I really played the arcade game at first. I think my first exposure, at least footage-wise, would have been the Double Dragon game in the Mexican arcade store because, my brother, or I think my brother held the video camera because, yes, back in the day, people did use video cameras. And he recorded footage of the game. So that was like my first exposure of seeing the game. And I was like, oh my God, this game looks super cool. And it's a beat 'em up. And there's a lot of stages. And I think that, there are two brothers that are, you could pick one of the brothers to, beat people up and shit like that. So I was like, okay, this game looks pretty good. It looks pretty poppin'. And then most likely my actual first time playing the game was probably, if I'm not mistaken, it's a long time ago, guys. It's like you
Oh
know.
yeah,
But
1988,
it's
87.
probably the Nintendo version. But it was still based on the like, whoa, like I saw the footage of the arcade game, so it looks pretty cool. So obviously when they had a home version of the game, and I think we rented at the local video store, it's like, holy shit, this looks pretty good. Like obviously it's not going to compare to the arcade, but you know, you still get excited that it's still Double Dragon and all that kind of stuff. So I think that was probably my first time.
And
Well,
I think Roxx, you played the NES version once upon a time, right?
not that long ago, actually. I tried to get it hooked up because I like to have something related to the game we're talking about be on the TV behind me. So I queued up the arcade game, the NES game. I have it here with me, but the it works. It's just the display looks like shit because it's on a regular hookup through the fucking TV. So um, looks all kind of staticky. But anyway, yeah. So I probably saw the original arcade back in 87, 88. But like I told you the last time, we had a little arcade close by to us, and it was at the mall about 15 minutes away. They would rotate games in and out because it wasn't a big space. Now I go back there. It's been a Chinese restaurant for the last 23 years, and I love it there too, though. At first, I wouldn't go there for like the first 3 years because they took out the arcade to put in the Chinese restaurant, but wontons always fucking win. I'm kind of goofy like that. So I go there now and I'm amazed at how small the place is. I'm like, this was an arcade? It's tiny. So they didn't have a ton of games, but I probably encountered Double Dragon at one point. I might have even played it when I was like 5 or 6. But yeah, my earliest firm memories would have been of the NES version. One of my buddies probably played it because everybody I knew, that was one of those NES games everybody had. And we'll talk about that when we talk specifically about the NES game. But in doing my research for this show, I found out a lot of fascinating stuff about the arcade game that makes me really want to like check it out. I'm sure I have it downloaded somewhere on one of my compilations somewhere, I'm sure. You see it's on the YouTube gimmick behind me here. But yeah, like it was the first of its kind in a lot of ways because originally it was going to be a sequel to a game called Renegade. I'm a little familiar with. I don't know if you guys ever played or are familiar with Renegade.
Yeah, I've
That
seen it
was
in the arcades.
Yeah, it was a different kind of beat 'em up that was very successful. And originally they were talking about doing this game as like a sequel to that. And then they decided for various reasons to just spin it off into its own thing. And it's kind of like they went for like a Mad Max Fist of the North Star kind of mashup, which is kind of interesting as far as the aesthetic goes. And they put in a lot of innovations. They said, well, let's make it 2-player so we can make twice as much money, which was pretty smart. First 2-player beat 'em up. First one to have like the scrolling stages and all that kind of stuff. Like you said, Panda, the first time you could like pick up enemy weapons and they could hit you and take them back. That was a really cool innovation, really cool gimmick. And a lot of games use that since, like fucking Final Fight. And, you know, it's become so familiar now to us when we play beat 'em ups. It's standard. So many of the things that we now look at as standard among beat 'em ups literally started with the arcade Double Dragon, the 2-player co-op, the side-scrolling convention, the weapons, all that good stuff. Just a lot of really cool innovations that obviously became very popular because they still show up today in various games. But yeah, it was a huge success. I think it was the third biggest selling arcade cabinet in Japan that year, in 87 through 88. And I think in America, it was the most successful arcade cabinet for 2 years in a row. I think it was 88 and 89. So it was huge, man. That's like, I know I must have run into it, even though if I played it like once, it was a lot. But yeah, no, it was everywhere. It did huge business. And that's before you even count in the spin-offs, the sequels, the comic books, the ancillary media, and all that stuff. It's probably the most important beat 'em up game ever made.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, and it's funny you brought that up because, like you said, it's a spiritual sister to Renegade, which is technically a westernized version of another series known as the Kunio-kun series, which was about a high school teenager who wore like an all-white school uniform, and he used to fight all the time against all these different guys. Now, one of the games ended up becoming Renegade, and then there were actually 2 more that came out in the States that a lot of people don't know. were part of the Kunio-kun series, and that was River City Ransom and Super Dodgeball.
Yeah.
Well,
I love Super
basically what
Dodgeball. That's a great fucking game. I love Super Dodgeball.
Exactly.
I wrote down the Kunio-kun thing, but I knew I was gonna fuck up the pronunciation, but I have it in my notes.
But yeah, they wanted to make it more westernized, so they actually took one of the games out of the series and turned it into Renegade, and then they wanted to make a more darker tone version of it, more grittier with 2 players, which then became its spiritual successor, which we currently know as Double Dragon. So minus the Kunio series, without it, there might not even be a brawling game genre.
Yeah. So the plot's pretty simple. It's basically takes place in I guess a post-apocalyptic future. It kind of, like you said, it does go with the Mad Max kind of Fist of the North Star kind of aesthetic. I see some art where Billy or Jimmy kind of look like Kenshiro, kind of sort of, or they have Mad Max type things on and things like that. And yeah, like you said, they were called Hammer and Spike in the arcade. But
Yeah,
so they own like a martial arts dojo, I believe. That was the whole thing that started it. And they got a girlfriend there. They got the Black Warrior Gang or the Shadow Warrior Gang. I'm not sure because the name keeps changing.
I had a
between
question
games.
about that.
Yeah.
Because in doing my research on specifically this original game, I keep seeing them referred to as the Black Warriors, but I distinctly remember seeing commercials for the NES sequels where they were referred to as the Black Shadow Warriors. So that confused me as well. Like, were they booking it on the fly, or what was the deal with that? Does anybody know?
That was a bit of a localization type deal. They just wanted to make it sound like a bit more scary. So they were like, instead of just, the black, brain fart.
The Black Warriors.
Instead of just calling them the Black Warriors, they decided to call them the Black Shadow Warriors because, ooh, that sounds more scary and mysterious. When actually, they were just originally known as the Black Warriors in the original part of the series.
This is when the muffins bite back.
Hold on, guys. Let's see if I can try this. Okay.
First time.
Go.
Yeah, it always works when you
Yes!
do that. Anyways, you froze there. You can repeat yourself real quick.
Okay, now you're back.
Wait, who did what?
You froze.
I unpaused you.
That's weird because for me it looked like Panda froze.
Hmm.
I forgot what the fuck I was even saying. I don't know. I don't remember what the fuck I said.
Yeah.
Once it's gone, it's gone.
Well,
Now I
anyway,
remember. Now I remember. I was just saying that, like, with the name change, it makes sense because when I think Black Shadow Warriors, I think of like ninjas and stuff versus like just Black Warriors. I think like Kamala the Ugandan giant, you know. So like it's a thing that's silly, but it's a little thing, but it makes sense with the fucking tone of the game. I like that's what I always heard Black Shadow Warriors. So I guess that was like second or third game maybe they came in with that one.
yeah. So basically, they come in and they sock Marion in the gut and carry her off. Yep, and Marion is Billy's girlfriend or Jimmy's girlfriend. I mean, we'll go into that. And yeah, so let's off the game. They got to go rescue her. They got to go through like 4 or 5 stages. I forgot if the original arcade had like 4 or 5 stages. I know the NES one only had 4 stages, and that third one was like super stretched out or some shit. So this game ain't long enough. Let's make stage 3 like fucking super long, you know? But on the arcade, I think it was like 5 stages or missions. They were called missions in that one.
Four.
Well, I have a question now. Okay,
Yeah.
So since you're saying, like, you said the NES version, it was a lot shorter, right?
Yeah.
So could that be the reason why it's known for being infamously hard?
I think so, to make up for it.
Well, yeah, because what they did on the NES, they changed the level layout. And again, we'll come back to this, but because they couldn't have as many enemies on the screen, they put a lot more platforming and trap deaths in, and that kind of made it more difficult in places. But when I played it recently, I don't want to talk too much about the NES version yet, but it seems like we don't have a ton of stuff to say about the arcade. But I don't know, we'll get there.
Yeah.
I can pretty much breeze through the main game. It's just I always get fucked up on the final boss. But the game itself is pretty easy to adapt to and cheese, actually. But, like I said, I can't really speak too much to the arcade. But yeah, it's actually canonical fact that when they did the NES port, because of the technical limitations of the NES, they had to make certain changes, and a lot of those changes did make that game a little tricky. But yeah, they had to for that reason, but there's also ways to work around that too.
I also always thought, just in a general sense, when it came to a lot of games that were ported from the arcade onto some of those older home consoles, especially the NES, the programmers still had the arcade mentality. So I always figured that's another reason why the difficulty was usually hard for those games. Just thinking back on it now.
Oh yeah, they used to piss me off. Still does. The Double Dragon NES to me wasn't that bad. Like I haven't beaten it though. Like that's the thing. I can rip through it, but then the final boss. But I haven't tried the arcade one in a long time. Like I swear I downloaded it or something. So I think I know I can play it. I just haven't. But yeah, I can almost beat the NES one. I got like super close. But there's certain things you have to kind of know, little tricks to get around some of the challenging spots. And when you know those things, it makes the game almost a little too easy. But there's no way to cheese through the final boss part. That's the thing.
Well, there could be a way. You just gotta pull out the genie, man.
Well, yeah, but see, I got the top loader gimmick, which the Game Genie, the original version doesn't work on. And that's what I have with the original
there is one creepy thing about the Double Dragon arcade game that a lot of people don't know. Now, if you notice, for as long as a game as it is, from beginning to end, there's no loading screens or anything of that nature.
Yeah.
That's because literally, if you look at the design of it, they literally just made one long design scroll from beginning all the way to end, which means, and they actually had to change the programming so you couldn't reverse it. Otherwise, there was a way to actually glitch it, and this was on the beta version of it, of the arcade game. You could glitch it to where at the very beginning, after being punched, and you come out of the garage, you could literally go to the left and go to the last part of the game automatically.
Yeah. And fight the boss and everything? Like,
yeah.
Wow.
That's nuts.
Now, given all the enemies would follow and it would crash, but still, you could go to the last part of the game just by going to the left. So they changed the programming, make sure no one could do that. And from there, it was just a linear from the beginning all the way to the end. But it could actually circle around, and you could go to the end of the game at the beginning.
Yeah. So in that game, I think the biggest things that even changed the whole storyline in general was the fact that the NES version, I guess we kind of mixed and matched there, but the NES version couldn't handle the two players because, the arcade, of course, you get Billy and Jimmy Lee. They're the brothers. They work together. They fight the bad guys. It's 4 stages. I think it was like the streets, a factory or something, the woods, and the hideout, like the Black Shadow Warriors hideout where you fight Willie at the end. But
what kind of a
the NES version?
What kind of a fucking name is that for a final boss, anyway?
Yeah, I know.
I mean, these enemies, man. Like, I didn't know their names until today. What the fuck is this shit? What the shit is this? We got fucking Williams. I just called him Tank Top Guy, but that's his name. Apparently Roper. That sounds like a fucking character on Facts of Life or some shit.
Yep.
He was Vest Guy to me, but his name's Roper. Like, oh god, imagine getting your ass kicked in a fucking game and dying to Roper. Like, just fucking hang yourself. You got beat by Roper. That's like getting slain by an elf. And then you got fucking Linda. Linda, she was cool. I used to call her, well, I can't say what I used to call her, but purple chick with the hair. Can't say what I actually said. They had the fucking bald dudes who now they're all just a bobo, but they had Zach and Jack. That's kind of clever. And Jeff. Like, that's great. And then Willie that's the boss. The final boss is fucking Willie. Like, again, oh god, I got smacked around by Willie. It's like, no, that's not how it works. You smack Willie around. Willie doesn't fuck you around. But oh man. So yeah, that's yeah, I don't know, man. Cool game, but they had some fucking very awkward naming conventions. Can't say I agree with a lot of those choices. Did those names stick around, or were they like changed for later games?
No, each game that brings them back. I mean, some of the characters do and don't come back. The more popular ones are Abobo and Linda. They'll always come back, those names, but you know.
Glad they changed that shit for the movie.
Yeah.
Willie.
Oh man. But
Pluck it out of the
anyway,
air for me. Johnny Rodriguez, tell me a worse name off the top of your head for a final video game boss than Willie. Pluck one out of the air for me.
It's a horrible name. A Bobo? That name's kind of dumb.
But he's not the final boss. I'm saying, like,
Well,
you play through the game, you grind through it, you die over and over again. You put like $5 in quarters into this fucking game, and you're just trying to get to the end, and you do, and finally, you're finally rewarded with the boss fight that's going to take you to the final thing at the end of the game. You're going to see the credits, and all you got to do is get past fucking Willie. Like, who the fuck is worse? Just on a name level. Like, who the fuck booked that? Give me a fucking break, man.
yeah, I know.
Could have
But,
been his mom.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
I'm mad
Oh,
about
in
it.
the,
I wasn't mad about it till right now. Now I'm furious.
Oh God. So in the NES version, this is where everything got kind of dicey and weird and affected the plot and even affected other media, to be honest. They made it one player, but the funny thing is you can only pick Billy. So it's like Mario, you pick, the first player goes first and whatever till he dies. Then the second player goes in and plays till he dies. But they're both Billy. It's like you're playing Mario 1, but both of them are Mario. You don't even have Luigi there. You know what I mean? So that was kind of weird. And I guess just for, I don't know, a split ending or just for the sake of saying like, well, it's Double Dragon, it's in the title, we got to have Jimmy in there somewhere. They added him as an extra boss. So you fight Willie in the NES version, but if you get past Willie, you actually have to fight Jimmy. Jimmy's like, he was the secret boss of the Black Shadow Warriors all along. And it's like, okay, which makes it awkward because in the later games, they fight side by side. So it's like, okay, because you guys kind of kiss and made up after that.
Well, here's the thing. We jumped over it, but in the arcade version, originally, if you beat the arcade version on 2-player, after you beat Willie, Billy and Jimmy would then, this is very interesting, especially, with how far we've come since then. If you beat the arcade game on 2-player, Billy and Jimmy will then fight each other to see who gets married. You gotta love that shit. Like, she comes in, it's Billy's girlfriend originally, and I don't know if maybe she was pissed off about him not being there to stop her getting punched right in the fucking uterus, but like she was a fucking Kentuckian who couldn't get a vacation day. But anyway, topical humor. Anyway, so I guess that pissed her off enough because at the end of the arcade game, she's willing to go home with either one of these guys, depending on who wins the fucking fight. And I just think that's super interesting. But yeah, they changed that for the NES game. They didn't have the programming skills because it was only their second NES game that the programmers ever worked on. We'll talk about that. But so that's why the game is what it is on the NES, because they literally were learning on the job, right, making this game. So it's glitchy and there's bugs in the NES game, and they couldn't program the 2-player, shit like that. So yeah, they had you play through as just Billy, and then at the end of the game, Jimmy turns out to be the real bad guy. It's like, fuck me. But yeah, it's like, how did they get away with pulling that shit? Did it ever make sense?
It's like, okay, so if Jimmy wins and he kills his brother because his brother faced from existence, Marion just comes up and hugs him and kisses him, no questions asked, like, whoa,
I love that she's willing to fucking, like, this implies so much. Like, this implies that sandwiches were being made leading up to this game, if you get my drift. I mean, I'm saying...
That was my theory.
Yeah, Marion was
they were making
double dragoned.
The Double Dragons and Marion were making dirty H's. This is not even cool.
I think she was, man. I'm suddenly having a lot less sympathy for this chick.
Or Jimmy and Marion were having a thing anyway, and she just wanted an excuse to get away from Billy, and there you go.
See, the people who make
Jimmy.
movies should have been asking these fucking questions.
Yeah, I know.
My theory was that she was having an affair with both brothers, but
See,
She never told one or the other, I guess.
is there somebody, a man of culture like Mark Rodriguez would have to inform me of this because you're so much more knowledgeable than I am in these spheres, but might there actually be a Double Dragon porn parody that would answer some of these questions?
I mean, I would not be surprised. I mean,
I personally haven't seen it. I mean, I've seen Thundercats. I've seen a lot of crazy shit. I don't think I've seen that though. But that
yeah,
would
I bet you-
I don't know. I don't think there's
bet-
any.
that would be
Now, of course, this is stuff from talking with other people. Of course, I would not indulge in such uneducated, disgusting filth,
but the
um,
canonical two-player ending of the arcade game, I'm saying, would lend itself very well to such an
well,
endeavor.
I think the art would probably have all three of them coming to an agreement. You know what I mean? But yeah, I think certain things that are that old somehow. I know that there's the whole Rule 34 where there's stuff and everything, but I think the real old stuff like kind of got away from it. I think I don't know.
These are the
They're
important.
probably but think about it. In Japan, there are probably a lot of doujinshi on it. There might have been some doujinshi where they kind of explored that. So
Oh, Jupi-chan, you'd be proud of me. Thanks to HoloLive, I'm up to like 5 words of Japanese I can speak now. It's great.
oh, what are the 5 words?
Oh, geez, Jesus Christ, you can put me on the spot. Well, I knew Ichiban already. My pronunciation.
Oh, Hulk Hogan.
Of course. That's how, I mean, did you ever hear the song? Like, he did a song, Ichiban, on his fucking record album they put out there in 83. It's got the
No,
hottest,
I've never heard it.
it's got the crunchiest bass line you'd ever heard in your life. You got to go on YouTube immediately after we're done and look up Ichiban by Hulk Hogan, Japan 83. It's great. But yeah, so there's Ichiban. Kawaii, is that how you say that?
Oh, that was so lame. Anyway. Kawaii or koi or kawaii? Koi or kawaii?
Oh God, I don't know. Like it's like Hawaii.
Well, but if it's like that, it's probably kawaii. Because kawaii means scary.
No, the one that means cute or whatever.
Kawaii.
Yeah.
Kawaii.
I'm white as fuck, man. My pronunciation is gonna be fucked up. Say so? That's one of them. Like, it's kind of like, it's roughly, I think, like it means innocent or something. I'm not a fucking 15-year-old Japanese girl, so I can't really say it. What's the other one? Yeah, I'm drawing a blank on the other one or two, but yeah, I'm getting there. I might get up to 8, like, by this time next year if I really work hard.
All righty. Hey, you need to put that into some promos.
I'm working on it.
So one more thing I do want to mention about Double Dragon, the NES version, before we go into other versions, because this game doesn't really have terribly too much to talk about, is one big difference is that in the arcade version, of course, like a more traditional beat 'em up, you all already have all your moves. No, yeah, your punches, kicks, throws. Oh, I always loved the like pulling hair knee bash thing. I always loved that. And
what you do to these guys?
Elbow of Doom and all that. But the NES version did it kind of like RPG style, where you only have like the basic moves, but the more you play the game, like the more points you score with the enemies you defeat and stuff like that, the more you learn the moves and you start doing the killer elbow, the Judas effect and all them other moves here and there. So that was a little different and stuff like that. And like Rikki said, a lot more platforming, a lot more cheap one-hit kills, which sucks because the game, I believe, only had three lives and maybe one continue, if even that.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a way where there's a spot. I forget exactly where it's at, but there's a spot where if you cheese it, you can get all the way up to your full 7 levels really fast. Like you can just like keep trick. There's a spot where like the enemies respawn if you like trick it somehow. I forget, but like, I haven't played it in like 2 years, but yeah. So you can get up to level 7 really early in the game, and then the rest of the game's really easy, except for some of the platforming stuff. But it's really easy to memorize because the game is actually really, really short if you know how to play it. Like I had it on behind me, the arcade game. I had it on a like no kill run, and somebody got through like 26 minutes. And this one's like 20 minutes for the NES version. So it's a really short game, if you know how to get through it. But yeah, there's a couple cheap spots. But yeah, a lot of that simply had to come from, like I said, the developer. It was only their second NES game they ever worked on, so they were really, really inexperienced. So I think given that, it kind of frames it a little bit differently. You have to say they did a good job for what they had, and it still turned out to be really successful. Like it was one of the biggest games that Christmas of '88. It was one of like the top 5 biggest Christmas games alongside like Zelda 2, Super Mario Brothers 2. So that's huge. It was in the same breath with those kind of games. Yeah, they had the B mode where the 2-player versus fighting thing. That was kind of neat, right?
Yeah, that was pretty unique. And that was one of the ways, at least then, because, like more modern beat 'em ups, you're beating up, let's say Linda, it'll say Linda up there. You'll know how much life she has left or whatever. But in this game, you're just fighting them, you don't know. But at least with that 2-player mode, the Street Fighter-ish kind of mode, you can finally see, oh, this guy's named Olivo, this guy's named Linda, this guy's named Jeff, and that kind of thing.
I mean, it was cool because they tried, even though they couldn't give you the arcade experience, they tried to give you something to kind of make up for it in a way, to distinguish it as its own thing. Because it's still a game that people look back on fondly. Like, it doesn't really hold a candle to the arcade, but even with the differences that they allowed for, making it more of a platform brawler, only having 2 enemies on the screen at once kind of sucked,
Yeah.
But, I mean, it was still a really well-paced game. It it doesn't overstay its welcome. It doesn't try to be more than what it is. I liked that you got new moves as you went along to kind of like make the whole experience. Yeah, it made the experience a little more textured rather than simply using the same.
It was like a brawler with almost like an RPG element because of the way you earn the system.
Yeah.
Man, I really wish I could have experienced that for myself. But like I said, we never had Double Dragon. But when I do think of NES, even from back then, like I said, I remember commercials. I remember seeing it. We just never rented it and we never played it. And to this day, I don't know why. I really don't. And I'm thinking back on it.
On the upside, like we said, the game is everywhere. You can actually download it to your phone. I'm not doing it right now.
No. See, no, I'm not like that. If I want, seriously, if there is an older game, I want to play it authentically. I want it on a regular TV. I want the original system. I want the cart in the system so I can play it and experience the way it was meant to be experienced. I've always been that way.
That is the ideal, but for the sake of for those for the sake of people who may not have that opportunity, but also have been, itching to play it, it has since been released for virtual consoles a couple times. It's been on the Wii, the Wii U, the 3DS, so it's been out there, the NES version.
It's actually now on PS4 at PS Network. You can still get it now, like $7 or $5 or something like that.
The arcade and NES versions are both out there to find, which is pretty cool. But I mean, even back in the day, man, I mean, if you could, I got my NES copy over here. I've got for like nothing on eBay. This game is everywhere because I forget how many copies do I have. It doesn't say exactly how many they sold, but the first 2 weeks that it was out, Toys R Us said it sold out everywhere when the NES
that was a big game.
I mean, that's PS. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, like the PS Network, you had PS4, you could download it, and it was good because that was one of those games. It was on Xbox Live for a while that I've always kind of put off because I always kind of, this was before I knew what I know now that, these companies can just all of a sudden decide, oh, we're not licensing this shit anymore and just pull it or whatever. So I always had the mentality that like, yeah, it'll be there. I'll get it next payday or payday after that, that kind of shit. So it's gone now from Xbox Live. So that pisses me the fuck off. But then when I checked out, when I got the PS4 and started checking out their store, I'm like, oh, it's here. And yeah, you know what? I get paid next Friday. I'm going to fucking get it because I'll be so pissed if it's gone a second time. Both Double Dragon 1 and 2 are there. So,
well,
and actually,
I will say this.
I was
just going to say, well, since I allegedly lost a PS4, because people don't know how to catalog, and originally I lost my PS2, hey, maybe I just pick up a PS4 and just get it.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
the only other version we played, because as Rikki said, it was converted for all over, like all the systems, you know. We did play the Genesis version. Johnny and I got to play Genesis version, and that one was like the arcade. It was a lot closer. I mean, maybe the music or sounds were a bit old compared to the arcade. Not that the arcade had, you know, because it's an old game, you know, it's not gonna have super, you know, theatrical sounds or whatever. But you know, it played good. It played good enough. Those two players. It was just like the arcade. You could still go to the option menu and fuck around for more lives and continue, so it's not that cheesy. Because dude, that final stage got fucking like these protruding things from the walls that knock you off. Because like it's like you can't go to the bottom of the screen or you'll fall off. So there's like these things that pop out and knock you off the wall, and then there's like these giant devil statues that like they're what do you call it? Their pitchforks are you know poking you and shit. So that's like annoying shit. Like Willie had a jacked up fortress, you know, to get.
Yeah, he sure did.
Actually,
Yeah.
as well on the PS4, considering what we were talking about earlier, there's actually a set known as the Kunio Kunfu Collection, which actually carries the original Japanese versions and the American versions of River City Ransom, Renegade, and Double Dragon.
Oh, that's cool.
The NES version.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, you know, I half was right earlier because I'm petting my dog here. She's getting a little antsy, and I'm looking at my notes also. But like, yeah, so both the Master System and Genesis version in turn were each a lot closer to the arcade than the NES version was. Master System version came out, I believe, first. But yeah, they both had much more similar level design to the arcade version. The colors obviously couldn't match up to the arcade, but they were able to get closer, have more enemies on the screen, have better level design, and so forth and so on. So, you know, it's kind of cool in its own way, though, because it wasn't the same experience across all platforms, right? Like in its own way, you had a game called Double Dragon, but you had so many different iterations of that same game, you know? So that's pretty cool because everybody who played a home port had a little bit different version of it. Most people played the NES comparatively numbers-wise. I'm pretty sure even more people played it on the NES than they did in the arcade. So I think when you say Double Dragon, most people probably think NES. But it did have a good little legacy across all of the home systems that were available at that time. But so you said you guys only played the Genesis version otherwise, right?
Yeah.
Well, I guess
Yeah, Bert and I played Genesis one. I don't know about any of you guys had any of the other versions. Now, one thing was when I was talking to Polk yesterday about the episode, he was asking me, "Oh, which one are you talking about? The NES version or the arcade or the this or the that?" And I'm like, "Oh," because he brought up the Game Boy Advance version, which is a very clever. Like it wasn't a straight up Double Dragon 1, you know, adaptation. It was Double Dragon 1, 2, and a bunch of made up like a whole bunch. It was like a big homage to Double Dragon. But that game's like fucking $700 on eBay now and shit.
Wait, which one?
The Game Boy Advance version of Double Dragon, which is called Double Dragon Advance, because you know it's like $700 on eBay. I was like, the other day, I'm like, yo, this costs a couple of bucks. I'll get it, but not at 700.
Dude, just fucking get a repro card, man.
I think those were also costing quite a bit, weren't they? They weren't. I mean, they were obviously cheaper, but they were still costing a couple of hundred.
Every repro cart for anything I've ever seen is no more than $50. I've never seen anybody charge more than $50 on a repro cart.
Those repro carts, they don't. That's the thing. I'm always careful what I buy and all that junk, because these consoles are my babies and all that. And
correct, but
they don't fuck up your console or things long term, do they, or whatever? Like,
no, not from what I've read. I mean, unless you know, most people are pretty reputable. So far, I've had no bad experiences. It's the only way I've been able to play some of the certain games I have.
Yeah.
Because like you said, when it comes to authentic carts, the market's ridiculous. But
and most people don't even buy them to play them. They just buy them to like show off that they have them, you know, or to sell them maybe a couple of years for twice as much or something. They don't even care about it as a game, to be honest.
I never buy anything I don't at least intend to play. I play everything eventually, even though sometimes it takes me a while. But yeah, when it comes to the other ports, you know, I didn't play any of them either. But I mean, I just think it's so amazing that Double Dragon came out for so many different things. I mean, when people say, "Oh, such and such game is everywhere," No, this game was everywhere, man. Fucking Master System, Genesis, Game Boy, the Game Boy Advance remake, Commodore 64, all the PCs in Europe and England and all over the place. You had the Atari Lynx version even, for fuck's sake. And
There was an Atari Lynx version.
there was an Atari Lynx version.
Wow. Well, you did again. That
I'm
doesn't
curious about
really
that one.
surprise
Was
me.
that
What?
was that one still based on the arcade, or was it its own thing?
I didn't find out too much about that one. Other than the only thing I know about is it exists. That's all I know. But then there were two versions. This was an interesting thing I found out. Like I said, even if I don't know too much about these games going in, I love doing these things because I like to read up and do my research to fill in some of the gaps, and you find out so much interesting stuff. There was actually two different ports of Double Dragon for the Commodore 64. There was basically the shitty one and the kind of not so shitty one. But so the original port was done by Binary Designs, and it was like not finished, and it was just done really badly. The people, it was like two people who didn't know what they were doing, kind of, and they just threw it together, and it was really horrible. And it's to this day considered like one of the worst ports of all time, and it's just horrible. So then, like, they let another company, Ocean Software, come up with their own version of Double Dragon for Commodore 64, and that one was moderately better received. So that's kind of interesting. It was rare for a console to get two versions of the same game, kind of like Tetris on NES, you know, that kind of a situation.
Yeah.
My
Oh,
dog.
you see, is that Zoe?
This is Zoe. I know there's Zoe. Zoe-chan. Zoe-chan, I love you. And then, of course, the one cool thing, too, is that the Atari 2600 version was super popular for, like, its time, considering the 2600 was, like, dead by then.
Yeah.
Like, that one sold a lot of fucking copies. I wrote it down. Okay, so it sold 500,000 copies, which doesn't sound like much, but keep in mind, this would have been like 1988. The Atari 2600 came out in 1978 or some shit like that. 2600 did. So, you know, you're thinking about a literally 20-year-old console. And Double Dragon was like the most successful game to come out that year for the Atari 2600. Doesn't sound like a huge accomplishment, but I mean...
Wait, you said it was on the 20... So it came out from the 2600, even though it's from the time period. It seemed like the 7800 would have been out at the time, too.
And it came out for the 7800 as well. That's how big this fucking game was.
No.
Can you give her a biscuit? Yeah. Biscuits.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I mean,
And
it
there was
was,
something else you mentioned. Something else that you mentioned earlier regarding like the different ports, especially with the Master System and the Genesis, and how the you said y'all were just saying that it was much closer to the arcade version, right?
Yeah.
At least that's one good thing that Sega had going for them, because that's kind of how Sega did their marketing anyway. Like they really wanted to bring the arcade experience home, and they had the know-how to do it and the programmers to do it.
Yeah. It was just weird though, because they came out on the Genesis, but I remember it came out kind of late in the lifespan. It wasn't, you know, for such an old game, they already had sequels and stuff. Like, it came out pretty late. I almost want to say it came out around a time where they already had Super Double Dragon for the SNES and stuff like that.
And that game even as well, like Super Double Dragon, that game had some flaws where it was like more faithful than the NES version, but it also was like missing the cutscenes that explain the plot, and
the ending wasn't even there at all. Like literally, they were so Technos rushed that game out of the door.
Wasn't the Japan version? Didn't the Japan version of Super Double Dragon have stuff that the American one didn't have? Like, I think there was a couple things different about it.
There weren't that many change-ups. It was rushed on both ends. Like, literally, the only thing is I think they gave more description of what was supposed to be going on there. It was literally that a bunch of martial artists were disappearing and that Billy and Jimmy were going to investigate and find out why they were disappearing. Otherwise, you were literally just playing Double Dragon and just pointlessly beating characters up. Given it was fun, but there was literally no reason.
Yeah. Now, some of the lore that kind of carried over before we go into the movie, I do want to point out that I guess we'll talk about it a little bit, but we'll get to it whenever it gets, whatever. We'll see how we feel. But the horrible cartoon show version of Double Dragon, And
I would watch
this
it.
is where William's gonna. Yeah, William, why don't you tell us what you think of that cartoon while you eat some muffins? We're gonna get William Punk here.
Oh, I had
First
my
off,
muffin right here.
this had to have been the. This is probably the most horrible version of Double Dragon I've ever seen in my whole life. Hold on 1 second. It's getting a little cold in here.
He's going for it.
There we go. That's the thumbnail. That's the thumbnail.
Yeah.
You guys, this is why you gotta be on camera sometimes. You can see your clap.
This is the absolute shit version of Double Dragon I've ever seen. First off, Billy looks like a dollar store Kenshiro from Fist of the North Star. Like, this is what would happen if you ordered Kid from Wish.
Jeez.
And Jimmy doesn't look any better. He looks like a knockoff Cody Rhodes before there was Cody Rhodes.
You know, I can almost see that version of Jimmy V with the neck tattoo.
Speak to him, Frosk.
Which the whole first season, he just like, at least they kind of kept it close to the game, because for the first season, he's just wandering around with Billy going, hey, dude, I'm sorry I was the Shadow Master. Hey, it's no problem. And then the Shadow Master shows up.
Yeah, that was one thing I was going to say. The first episode at least somewhat went with the game and with that weird NES version of the storyline, which again was caused just because they couldn't do the 2-player, where Jimmy Lee was the Shadow Master and Billy had to, I guess, wake him up from the evil side and stuff. But in doing that, you know, a new Shadow Master came up. And also, I remember the first episode, Willie and Abobo were actually in it as bad guys. So, hey, oh my God, actual Double Dragon bad guys. But of course, the Shadow Master gets rid of them, and now he's got these weird, you know, Saturday morning cartoon villains and junk and stuff
Which
like
by
that.
far, as far as the character design, Shadow Master had such a mean mullet that they actually had to like cut parts out of his costume just to make sure that the mullet flowed all the way through. I'm sorry, Rikki, he got you beat tenfold.
Well, you know, when you're right. But at the same time, you know, credit where credit's due on that. You know, you're right about that. They definitely knew how to show off the goods. I didn't really remember too much about that show. I know I've seen it, but I didn't really make it a point to watch it because I didn't know much about the games, but I thought the show was kind of, yeah, I don't know. But wasn't that like on USA at some point or Action Zone or some shit?
Yeah,
My theory is like, if you're trying to remember something from your childhood and you can't remember what station or channel it came on, my mind would say, you know what, it was probably USA because that's where everything else just seemed to go.
Yep.
The weird thing
Yeah,
is
they had
that
almost
show-
everything at some point.
that show was always like super early, like 6 or something or 5:30 in the morning or some bullshit. And the only way I found out about it was because I was flipping through a TV guide once. Because remember TV Guide? Do they still sell TV guides nowadays? Do they? Don't they? I don't know. Right?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. They do. Except it's just not like that little digest type. It's like a big, thin magazine type. I mean,
That's
it's just
weird.
it's weird looking.
But yeah, so I was flipping through it. I don't know, whatever, and I just saw Double Dragon. Double Dragon? What? You know, so I was one of the very few people that knew how to program a VCR. So I did program it one Saturday or whenever to record whatever was playing at 5:30 in the morning, and that's when we got to see the episode. But you know, but I am curious about one thing though. Like, who are the other characters? Because I only know it mostly from one random episode I saw and just got off a video game. And the video game was mostly the Lee brothers and all the bad guys. So I never got to see, you know, who are the other good guys. Because I think it was more good guys too, right? It wasn't just them, right? It was other guys. And I'm assuming Marion was there in some capacity.
It was Billy, Jimmy, Miriam was a cop. I can't remember any other characters. I really don't. I do remember this, though. Thanksgiving, they debuted a new cartoon. Well, technically an older cartoon. They had brought it back out on Thanksgiving Day after Double Dragon. So it was Double Dragon, and then right after that, Battletoads.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, I love that cartoon. It's just too bad. Yeah, obviously now it's way too late, but back then it was so cheesy. It was like Turtles, but up to 11 with the goofiness and silliness. You know what I mean? Because the Turtles, for better for worse, they still followed some logic and they still followed some real physics. You know what I mean? Like the Turtles weren't like, whoa, Shredder, you know, that kind of cartoony stuff. But like, the Double Dragon cartoon had the Battletoads cartoon had the bad guys coming out of fucking soda machines and junk like that. You know, it was goofy.
Yeah,
and,
they were doing like Looney Tunes and Tex Avery takes all over the cartoon.
which kind of fits because, you know, their limbs transform into weapons and things
Yeah.
and all that.
I
Another day, I
never watched it. I remember it, but I didn't watch it. And same with Double Dragon. I remember it existed, but I never seeked it out to watch.
I love the cheesy Beach Boys type like soundtrack, the theme song and everything. The other day, I was in a stupid mood and I played that shit like 3-4 times in a loop.
I mean, I ain't mad at you. I back then,
Like,
I had the
here
same
we
experience.
go with our battle cry, Battletoads rule. Like, it was just so cheesy, you know, complete with the woo and all that with that mood and everything. That's the first time I ever heard of Oxnard, California. I remember I one time met some dude that brought that was from there, and I'm like, oh, from that cartoon, because that's the first time. The name sounds so weird. I thought it was a made up cartoon, you know, place. I didn't know there really was in Oxnard, California, but you know. But anyways, back to Double Dragon. Like I was saying, that cartoon went with the plot sort of from the game that Billy was evil and turned, I guess, good. I guess because he's in part 2 as a second player, right? But the comic books, the Marvel comics, because they had a short run of Double Dragon, they also had the dragons constantly like squabbling over. Yep, there you go, squabbling over Marion, where there was one issue in particular that's like, okay, you know what? That does it. To the death for Marion. And I'm like, fuck. And they were, I mean, I'm talking bloody, man. They were beating each other bloody. Like, I don't know what Marion got down there, but like, damn, they were going crazy for that in that comic, man.
I'm sorry. There is nobody on the planet that's worth fighting like that for. Just saying.
Actually, in their defense, what happened was they had let a gang loose and there was a character who could copycat anybody. And while the whole gang was on the field, she basically copycatted Billy and Jimmy to make the whole gang look like the other brother till it was actually down to the last two brothers left.
That's right.
And they ended up fighting each other and beating the snot out of each other to the death.
Yeah, because each one thought they were like the copy.
Yeah.
Oh,
but
yeah, that's right. And I own up to like issue 5 or something. I'll probably get the rest later. It's only about 10 or so books. I'm not that much, you know, behind and everything.
Even though to spark it off and kind of sucker punch Marion and get her out of the situation,
She stayed getting
the character Stealth did transform into Jimmy and then pull a Dio and just like snatch the kiss from her, and she was like, "What?" Knock her out. So yeah,
I was hoping
to
go over this because I found out in doing my research there was a 6-issue Marvel comic, but I never encountered that. I never looked at that, so I know nothing about it. I wasn't able to find much. So,
if it's 6 issues and I only got 1 to go, so I can have the whole collection. That's cool.
How many? There was 6, right? 6 issues.
I think so. I got
I had like the first 3 issues.
To counter Jupi's point, I mean, I would disagree with the fact that you never fight somebody to death for some strange, but I would need to see who we're talking about. I don't know what Marvel Comics Marion looks like. I mean, if she's like a Tory Black kind of person, then yeah, I would definitely fight somebody to the death over that.
We're cultured. We're very cultured.
Well,
but,
to kind of put it to you,
she spoke in a very absolutist tone. I don't care who it is. You never go that far. Nah.
I didn't say never. I just said like,
what you
doing it?
Okay,
I ain't doing
Rikki,
it. I pay someone else to do it for me.
you're just as big as an art and a comic fan as I am. So to give you a description, literally, she looks like a Jim Lee X-Men Jean Grey in a gray cop uniform.
Okay, so like, yeah, I mean, that would be worth it. Because I was gonna say, like, if it's somebody like red catsuit Britney Spears, right, that would be worth it. You'd kill somebody for that.
Yeah.
Like,
Now another thing also remember it's all post-apocalyptic, so there probably aren't that many women around. So
these are the important questions. These are the shit you think about at 3 a.m. when the power goes out.
yeah,
Chicks
it's,
are
it's like it's
"He's
like
probably
like
thinking
the
about other
meme
girls."
with she's probably thinking about other women, and the guy's thinking like, was Marion really worth the Lee brothers fighting for? You know, like.
Can Marion still have children after that devastating uppercut to the solar plexus?
Sure, she can. As long as she didn't knock the ovaries out of place.
Well, in places like Texas and Indiana and
Oh my God.
Carolina, we're about to start seeing that theory tested.
Oh my God. Okay, guys.
Oh God.
Before we all get canceled, before Spotify comes down on us.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. So let's just say that if you're standing outside a garage door and a couple of tough looking guys come at you and you're like a woman all by yourself, yeah, you protect that your
You got to do the Bret Hart
reproductive organs. But anyways,
Bret Hart steel plate gimmick.
Oh my gosh, I just thought about it. So like I said, oh gosh, I hate myself. Okay, you don't want to have kids? Get yourself punched.
oh God, okay. So
Yeah, you
anyways,
don't have to
guys,
go to
now
the
we're gonna
doctor.
move
You don't have
on.
to go to the doctor and have them do it. Just get a thug and punch you a few times in that area, knock all the junk out or whatever. You're set.
Well, I mean, remember, folks, it's okay because a woman's saying it. So anyways, before, assuming that you guys are still listening to us here, that we didn't get like booted off the air, let's start talking about the live action movie that came out in the late 90s.
Can't we keep talking about chicks getting punched in the stomach?
Oh my God. No, yeah. Oh my God.
Like,
Anyway.
does the ambulance play the Mission 1 music like when they come to pick you up? It's just like,
hey, come on.
Yeah.
Real quick, in all seriousness, before we move on, though, I just wanted to say, because we were talking about the cartoon, I mean, I had the same experience back as a kid over and over again, and I think that it's kind of tragic that in the pantheon of animated series based on video games, there were a few during that era, more than a few, maybe. You know, you had your Double Dragons, you had your Street Fighters, your Mortal Kombats. Mortal Kombat's definitely not for kids, though. Pay no attention to the animated series. It's very clearly aimed at 6-year-olds. You know, you look at the big picture and, you know, out of all of them, it's like, so what's the Captain N? It's like, so what's the best of them? Are any of them any good? It's like, Super Mario Brothers Super Show is probably the best one. And that shit ain't that good either.
Mario Brothers Super Show. I mean, they didn't have much to work with. They made up a lot of
They only had 2 games, and there wasn't much plot.
It was still more fun to watch than the fucking Double Dragon cartoon, or the Street Fighter cartoon, or the Mortal Kombat cartoon. Those cartoons were offensively bad, like they were working overtime to piss you off, you know. And Captain N was tolerable, but Captain N was also shit.
I mean, Kid Icarus and Mega Man bugged the fuck out of me with their speech pattern.
Oh, Simon Belmont, fucking, like, it was, you know, Lana was cute, but, you know,
looking back on Captain N now, yeah, I can kind of see it, but at the time, I thought it was pretty cool.
I watched the hell out of it because it was NES stuff on TV. It was like, it was legitimizing this nascent platform of video games, because now video games were on TV literally. So it's like, oh, this is awesome. But, you know, it was very much diminishing returns, because, you know, even as, you know, weird as the Super Mario Brothers Super Show was, like, it's still more fun to go back and rewatch than any of those other ones. Because every time one would come out, it's like, oh, cool, Double Dragon cartoon. Let's check this out. Oh, okay. And then
I liked the Power Team, though. That was part of Video Power. I don't know if you guys remember it. It was like Acclaim game properties got together. It was Quirk from the puzzle game, Bigfoot, because Bigfoot had a game from Acclaim, Max Force from Narc, as the most goody-goody straight-laced cop ever, from a game from Narc where you're fucking blowing people up.
Whoa.
And people that fucking, you know, you get ganja bonuses in the game and stuff like that. So they put him
in the play Narc.
Narc's a cool fucking game, man. Narc was a good game.
Yeah, and let me see who else. Oh, Tyrone from Arch Rivals and everything. And basically their whole plot is that the Bigfoot talks, so they go on Bigfoot to ride around and stop bad guys. The bad guys were Mr. Big, Spike and Joe from Narc. and the premise was that they gotta stop it from because they always commit crimes or whatever. They gotta stop them, but you know how the cartoons always are like the turtles, right? Shredder always gets away. The plot's to stop him once and for all, but he always gets away. Their plot's to stop them. But the flip side is the dude somehow has like their original NES cartridges on him. So his thing was if he manages to zap the heroes with the cartridges, they'll get back in their game. And his plan is always to stop because because once they're back in their games, well, no one can stop me now. Wahaha, that kind of thing. So that was kind of cool. And the host of the show, Johnny Arcade, was in the cartoon as well because it was a video game review show. So he would like have an NES advantage and talk to them through somewhere because they didn't have a headset on or nothing. But it was talking to them. It was like a radio communication without the radio. So I don't know. But he would give them orders and stuff. And sometimes he would even control it. He would control Bigfoot sometimes and stuff like that. So it was a weird cartoon, but it was kind of cool. I mean, good animation and stuff. It took itself a bit more seriously than Captain N, but it still had all these goofy oddities when you compare like from the game where they come from, and so, especially Narc. You know what I mean? Like they turned Max Force into like Mr. Gadget guy because he always had little things on his belt or whatever that like to pick locks or to do this or whatever. And Quirk would show himself as a giant tomato. That was a running gag because the bad guy was a gangster, so the running gag was the gangster always say, oh, that little tomato, and Quirk's like, that's tomato, and go after him and stuff. And Tyrone would always be bitchy. He'd always be like, oh man, every time shit happens to him or whatever. And I like because he was a basketball player. I was like one of his, I don't know if it's always, but it's one of the catchphrases is like, man, you keep doing that, I'm gonna slam dunk you. I was like, I was always a fan of that shit. But oh yeah, Kuros from what was that game called? Wizards and Warriors? With the guy that one game that had Fabio on the cover?
Yeah.
Iron Sword.
That was Iron Sword. But,
yeah. So he was in there too. And his gimmick was talking all his stories. Everything would remind him of some story. No one would really give a fuck to listen. That was his thing. And yeah, it was an interesting cartoon, one of the cartoons, but it was only part of a Video Power. So I guess they never released episodes on, VHS or nothing. So it's like, if we don't watch the show, it never got re-released because I don't know, maybe with the rights, maybe they can't release the cartoon on its own, or the cartoon would be way too short because it was in between segment. The dude starts with live action stuff, they played a cartoon, more live action stuff, so the cartoon itself was probably 15 minutes or something like that. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But
sort of like the Mario cartoons, right? I mean, I know they do have their releases, but
they would release them with the
music.
segments, though. I think.
No, I meant I was saying like Mario cartoons, like Mario, especially the Super Mario Brothers Super Show and Mario Brothers 3. This is something that I noticed because I'm a music person. How they, if you see re-releases of those, they had to cut out music, but they don't have the rights for the music anymore. Like I said, the episode where they rapped the whole episode, which is still burned into my memory for some odd reason when I originally saw it as a kid. I remember all the music. I remember the James Brown stuff because my dad's a James Brown fan, and I grew up listening to it. So it was like, and then I remember I heard it. I came across the episode like years later. I was like, no, that's not what they were playing. I remember what they were playing. I know the song was not played here. Stuff like that.
The weird thing is. In Mario 3, when they had the Milli Vanilli episode.
Milli Vanilli, yes. Oh my gosh, I saw that episode. I was like,
yeah.
I know what song they played there. I know what song they played there. I used to like Milli Vanilli. I said, I remember this song. No, that is I Blame It on the Rain. That's what he was playing. And I was like, maybe it wasn't that song. But I remember, if I was watching, I probably could tell you. But yeah.
Yeah, there was some song. I forgot where it wasn't a cartoon, but I forgot from what episode or what. But I think it was one of those montage type songs, but they would use that song now to replace any
song. What they did when I was watching the DVDs, I bought all that stuff. I'm so glad to have them. I bought all that stuff the first time it came out on DVD, so I got the first run of like Super Mario Brothers Super Show, Adventures of Super Mario 3, Captain N, and Super Mario World. I got all that stuff, but I noticed right away that they used the Jimmy Hart version of Beat It, I'll call it, for like every episode. Like every time they needed to do a montage or they were doing a runaway from the bad guy scene, it would be like,
Yeah, that.
Yes,
That.
yes, yeah.
They played it like
I heard
every
it.
fucking episode. And I didn't have memories as crisp as yours, Jupi, but I definitely was like, they
Music.
couldn't possibly
music.
have ran this same stock music in 2/3 of the episodes of this show, could they? But like every episode was like, oh, here come the Koopas. It's like, wow. But yeah, so like you said, it was just they did use a lot of original music that they had.
Or licensed stuff, and they
I
lost the
hate
license.
like that kind of
They
stuff
can't do that.
though. I mean, I understand the reason, the copyrights and whatever, but
It does suck, but in a sense we're lucky we got anything because of shit like that. Because it's like we still can't get Muppet Babies because of shit like that.
Oh
yeah.
gosh, they use so
So they would
many
always
clips
have
for
like
stuff.
all the movie clips and junk.
From like 8 different studios. They had Sony, Disney, Warner Brothers. It would all be in the same thing. That's why that can't be released because the rights are a fucking nightmare to negotiate, especially now 25, 30 something years after the fact. So
Yeah. That's why like in Japan, we got a couple of games where all the characters are from Shonen Jump, but then like you can't release it here because like different dubbing studios got their grubby hands on them, you know. Like,
yeah, it's a shame. But what are you gonna do?